Marcus stared at his phone as it vibrated for the fourth time that morning. The name on the screen was one he had once sworn he would cherish for the rest of his life. Angela, the woman who had stood beside him when he had nothing. The woman who had worked double shifts while he sat at the kitchen table filling out job applications that never seemed to lead anywhere. The woman who skipped meals so he could eat, postponed her own dreams so he could chase his, and believed in him even on the days he had stopped believing in himself. For a brief moment, Marcus looked at her name and remembered every promise he had made. Then, without saying a single word, he pressed decline. Seconds later, he opened his contacts, scrolled to her name, and blocked her number forever. To anyone watching, it looked like the end of an ordinary phone call. But that single tap marked the beginning of a story that would leave everyone who knew them asking the same question. How could a man forget the woman who carried him through the hardest years of his life the moment success finally knocked on his door? Just 6 weeks earlier, Marcus had celebrated landing the corporate job he had dreamed about for years. Friends congratulated him. Family called him an inspiration. His social media was filled with smiling photos, expensive suits, and messages about hard work finally paying off. Few people knew that every step he had taken toward that success had been built on sacrifices that were never his alone. Angela had paid bills he couldn't afford. She worked weekends, holidays, and overnight shifts while he studied for certifications that eventually opened doors he once thought were locked forever. Whenever Marcus felt like giving up, she reminded him that difficult seasons didn't last forever. She believed their breakthrough would belong to both of them. Instead, the moment Marcus stepped into his new life, Angela slowly disappeared from it. Calls went unanswered, messages were ignored, excuses became silence, and silence became distance. Then came the decision that changed everything. Marcus convinced himself that he deserved a fresh start, one that no longer included the woman who had helped him build it. He believed he had closed one chapter of his life and opened a better one. What he didn't realize was that Angela wasn't the broken woman he imagined she would become. While Marcus was celebrating his new beginning, Angela was quietly making decisions of her own. She wasn't planning revenge fueled by anger. She was preparing something far more meaningful, something Marcus never saw coming, something that would force him to confront the true cost of forgetting the person who believed in him when no one else did. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why success doesn't always reveal a person's character. It often exposes who they were all along. Marcus and Angela's story didn't begin with wealth, luxury, or success. It began in a small apartment on the south side of Atlanta, where every dollar had a purpose and every dream seemed just out of reach. They met at a neighborhood community event through mutual friends, and what started as casual conversations quickly grew into something deeper. Marcus admired Angela's kindness, her quiet confidence, and the way she always found hope in situations that left everyone else discouraged. Angela saw something different in Marcus. She saw a hardworking man with ambition, someone who wanted more out of life but simply needed the right opportunity. They weren't the kind of couple who spent weekends in expensive restaurants or posted glamorous vacations online. Their happiest moments came from simple things: a homemade dinner after a long day, late-night conversations about the future, and sharing dreams that felt impossible to everyone except the two of them. They often talked about buying a house one day, starting a family, and building a life they could both be proud of. Every promise they made was built on the belief that they would face every challenge together. For a while, life seemed to reward that optimism. Marcus worked steadily at a manufacturing company, earning enough to keep the bills paid, while Angela worked as a nursing assistant at a local care facility. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable, and stability was enough. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. The company Marcus worked for announced massive layoffs after losing several major contracts. Hundreds of employees were called into meetings one after another. When Marcus walked through the front door that evening carrying a small cardboard box filled with his belongings, Angela immediately knew something was wrong. He tried to smile, but the disappointment on his face told the story before he said a single word. After years of loyal service, he was unemployed. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Marcus applied everywhere he could think of. Every morning started the same way. Coffee on the table, laptop open, another round of applications, another collection of rejection emails. The confidence that had once defined him slowly disappeared. Each unanswered application made him question whether he was ever going to recover. Angela refused to let Marcus carry that burden alone. Without hesitation, she picked up extra shifts at the hospital. When that still wasn't enough, she began driving for food delivery services in the evenings and cleaning offices on weekends. There were nights when she barely slept before getting up to do it all again. She quietly canceled vacations they had planned, postponed buying new clothes for herself, and stretched every paycheck until there was almost nothing left. Marcus often apologized, telling her she deserved someone who could provide more. Angela would simply smile and remind him that relationships weren't measured by who earned the bigger paycheck, but by who stayed when life became difficult. She believed this season would eventually pass, and she refused to let Marcus give up on himself. Instead of dwelling on rejection, she encouraged him to learn new skills and pursue certifications that could open better opportunities. She even paid the enrollment fees from money she had been secretly saving for a vacation they had always dreamed of taking together. There were evenings when Marcus wanted to quit altogether. He questioned whether chasing another career was worth the sacrifice. Every time doubt crept in, Angela sat beside him at their kitchen table, reminding him of the man she had fallen in love with. She told him that losing a job didn't mean losing his value. Those conversations became the foundation that kept Marcus moving forward. Slowly his confidence returned. He completed certification after certification, attended interviews, expanded his network, and began believing that a better future was still possible. Watching Angela sacrifice so much filled him with gratitude. One quiet evening after another long study session, Marcus reached across the table, held Angela's hand, looked directly into her eyes, and made a promise he believed with all his heart. He told her that when success finally came, every sacrifice she had made would be worth it. He promised that she would never have to struggle again, that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted believing in him, and that no amount of money or success would ever come between them. Angela believed every word because at that moment Marcus believed them too. Neither of them could have imagined that the very success they had prayed for together would soon test those promises in ways neither of them was prepared for. Then everything changed. The breakthrough Marcus and Angela had prayed for finally arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Marcus had just finished another interview when his phone rang. This time, it wasn't another polite rejection or a recruiter promising to keep his resume on file. It was an official job offer from one of Atlanta's fastest-growing financial consulting firms. The position came with a salary that was more money than Marcus had ever imagined earning, full benefits, performance bonuses, and opportunities for rapid promotion. For a few seconds he couldn't even find the words to respond. Tears filled his eyes as he accepted the offer. The first person he called wasn't a friend or a family member. It was Angela. When she answered, Marcus could barely get the words out before breaking down in tears. Angela screamed with excitement on the other end of the phone, and before he arrived home that evening, she had already prepared his favorite meal. They hugged for what felt like forever, thanking God for finally answering the prayers they had whispered together through so many difficult nights. It felt like the beginning of the life they had always imagined. During Marcus's first few weeks at the company, everything seemed perfect. He left for work each morning wearing tailored suits instead of worn-out jeans, carrying a leather briefcase instead of a backpack filled with job applications. Angela ironed his shirts before every workday and packed his lunch with little handwritten notes wishing him a great day. Marcus often called during his lunch break just to tell her how grateful he was. Every evening he shared stories about his coworkers, exciting projects, and how welcomed he felt by his new team. Angela listened proudly, smiling every time he talked about finally feeling respected again. Watching Marcus regain his confidence brought her more happiness than buying anything for herself ever could. She believed every sacrifice had finally been rewarded. As the months passed, Marcus's world began expanding in ways neither of them had expected. His coworkers invited him to networking dinners, executive mixers, and weekend business retreats. Conversations that once centered around paying rent and stretching grocery money slowly changed into discussions about luxury apartments, investment portfolios, expensive watches, and exclusive restaurants. Marcus wanted to fit into this new environment, and little by little he started changing. He upgraded his wardrobe, bought designer shoes, and spent hours studying the lifestyles of the executives he admired. At first, Angela encouraged him, believing these changes were simply part of his professional growth. But over time, something else changed too. Marcus no longer rushed home after work. The late nights became more frequent and the explanations became shorter. Business dinners turned into after-hours gatherings, and after-hours gatherings became weekends away for corporate events. When Angela asked simple questions about his day, Marcus responded with one-word answers or claimed he was too exhausted to talk. The man who once couldn't wait to tell her everything was becoming someone who barely spoke at all. Angela tried to convince herself that the new job simply demanded more of Marcus's time. She reminded herself that successful careers often came with long hours and greater responsibilities. She continued supporting him exactly as she always had, preparing dinner even when he came home long after midnight and waking early to wish him a good day before he left for work. But the emotional distance between them kept growing. Marcus stopped noticing the little things Angela did for him. The handwritten notes disappeared from his lunch because he never mentioned them anymore. Family dinners became rare because Marcus was always too busy. Weekend plans were canceled at the last minute because another networking event had suddenly appeared on his calendar. Even when they sat together in the same room, Marcus seemed somewhere else, constantly checking emails, replying to messages, or scrolling through his phone with a smile Angela hadn't seen directed at her in weeks. The compliments Marcus once gave Angela slowly disappeared. Instead, he began making comments that left her wondering if success had changed the way he saw her. He suggested she update her wardrobe because it didn't match the image he wanted to present at company events. He joked that she wouldn't understand the conversations he had with executives because she wasn't part of the corporate world. Sometimes he corrected the way she spoke in front of his new friends, laughing it off as harmless advice, while Angela quietly forced a smile to hide how deeply those moments hurt. The promises Marcus had made around their kitchen table seemed to fade further into the background with every promotion, every bonus, and every new connection he made. Angela wasn't losing Marcus all at once. She was losing him one conversation, one canceled plan, and one unanswered phone call at a time. Then one evening, everything became impossible to ignore. Marcus told Angela he had another late meeting with clients and probably wouldn't be home until after midnight. It sounded believable because he had used the same explanation many times before. Angela wished him a good evening and tried to distract herself with a movie, but something didn't feel right. Hours passed without a single message from Marcus. Around 9 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a notification from social media. A mutual acquaintance had posted photos from an upscale rooftop restaurant in downtown Atlanta. Angela casually opened the pictures, expecting nothing more than city lights and dinner plates. Instead, her heart nearly stopped. There, standing in the background with a smile she hadn't seen in months, was Marcus. He wasn't sitting with clients, he wasn't attending a business meeting, and he wasn't alone. Angela had just discovered something she never expected. Angela stared at the photo for several seconds, hoping her eyes were playing tricks on her. She zoomed in once, then twice, searching for anything that could explain what she was seeing. But there was no misunderstanding. Marcus was standing beside a beautifully dressed woman, laughing in a way Angela hadn't seen him laugh in months. His hand rested comfortably on the woman's back as they posed with a group of coworkers beneath the glowing lights of the rooftop restaurant. The expression on Marcus's face wasn't the tired look of a man working late with clients. It was the relaxed smile of someone enjoying himself without a single worry. Angela's first instinct was to call him immediately and demand an explanation. Her finger hovered over his name, but she stopped. Deep inside, something told her that if she wanted the truth, she couldn't give Marcus time to prepare another excuse. She quietly put her phone down and waited. Marcus didn't return home until after 1 o'clock that morning. He walked through the front door carrying the same confident smile he had been wearing in the photograph, but it disappeared the moment he saw Angela sitting awake in the living room. He apologized for being late and claimed the meeting had lasted much longer than expected. Without raising her voice, Angela simply asked how the clients liked the presentation. Marcus answered effortlessly, adding details about imaginary conversations and fake business discussions, as though he had rehearsed them in his head. Angela listened carefully, never mentioning the photograph she had already seen. When he finally went to bed, she remained on the couch, realizing that the man who once struggled to hide even the smallest surprise from her could now lie directly to her face without showing the slightest sign of guilt. That painful realization hurt far more than the photograph itself. Over the following weeks, Angela stopped asking questions. Instead, she started paying attention. She noticed Marcus spending more time protecting his phone than talking to her. Every notification was quickly hidden. Every phone call was taken in another room. His password suddenly changed and he never left his phone unattended. The expensive cologne she had never seen before became part of his daily routine. New designer suits filled the closet, while conversations between them became shorter with each passing day. Marcus no longer thanked Angela for the sacrifices she continued making around the house. He behaved as though her support had simply become expected, almost invisible. The promises he had made during those difficult years seemed to have faded from his memory, replaced by a growing belief that his success belonged entirely to him. Angela eventually learned the identity of the woman from the photograph. Her name was Vanessa, a marketing executive who had recently joined Marcus's company. Through mutual acquaintances and social media, Angela discovered that Vanessa genuinely believed Marcus was single. Marcus had carefully erased every sign of his relationship whenever he was around his new coworkers. There were no photographs of Angela on his desk, no mention of the woman who had worked endless hours to help him reach the position he now proudly occupied. To the people in his new circle, Marcus presented himself as an ambitious bachelor focused entirely on his career. Angela felt her heart break all over again, not simply because Marcus was seeing another woman, but because he had quietly erased the life they had built together. It was as if the years of sacrifice, loyalty, and unconditional love had never existed. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus announced that he needed to attend another company networking event. Angela smiled politely, wished him a productive evening, and watched him leave. A few minutes later, she picked up her keys and drove toward the venue listed on the invitation she had found lying on the kitchen counter earlier that week. She parked across the street and waited. Nearly an hour passed before Marcus arrived. He wasn't alone. Vanessa stepped out of another vehicle and Marcus greeted her with a warm embrace before they walked inside together. There was no hesitation, no concern about being seen, and no sign that Marcus feared the consequences of his actions. Angela remained in her car, tears filling her eyes as she watched the man she loved choose someone else without ever giving a second thought to the woman who had stood beside him through every hardship. She could have walked into that building. She could have confronted them in front of everyone. She could have exposed every lie Marcus had told. Instead, she quietly started her car and drove away. That drive home changed Angela forever. She realized she could spend months begging Marcus to remember the promises he had made, or she could accept the painful truth that the man sitting in that restaurant was no longer the Marcus she had fallen in love with. From that day forward, she stopped pleading for his attention. She stopped asking where he had been and stopped waiting by the window for him to come home. Instead, she focused on herself. She organized every financial document she could find, gathered records of the bills she had paid during Marcus's unemployment, saved messages, emails, and receipts, and scheduled a meeting with an experienced family attorney. She reopened the savings account she had quietly neglected for years and began making plans that Marcus knew nothing about. Every decision she made was calm, careful, and deliberate. She wasn't acting out of revenge. She was preparing to protect the future she had almost sacrificed trying to save someone who no longer valued her. Meanwhile, Marcus mistook Angela's silence for acceptance. He believed she had finally stopped questioning him because she had given up. He enjoyed the freedom of living two separate lives, convinced he had complete control over the situation. At work, he continued building his reputation as a rising corporate star. At home, he assumed Angela would always be there whenever he needed her, just as she had been during the hardest years of his life. He never imagined that every late night, every lie, and every broken promise was quietly strengthening Angela's resolve instead of breaking her spirit. Marcus believed he had already won. He believed success had placed him beyond the consequences of his choices. He couldn't have been more mistaken. Marcus thought he had won, he was wrong. Angela's meeting with the attorney lasted less than an hour, but it changed the direction of her life forever. For the first time in months, someone listened to her without interruption. She laid every document on the table, bank statements showing the rent she had paid during Marcus's unemployment, receipts for his certification courses, tuition payments, utility bills, grocery expenses, and countless transactions that proved she had carried their household through the darkest season of their lives. She even produced handwritten notes Marcus had left years earlier thanking her for believing in him and promising that one day he would repay every sacrifice she had made. The attorney carefully reviewed everything before looking up and telling Angela something she hadn't heard in a very long time. "You have protected him for years. It's time to protect yourself." Those words gave Angela a sense of peace she thought she had lost forever. She wasn't looking to destroy Marcus. She simply refused to allow the years she had invested in their marriage to be dismissed as though they had never happened. Over the next several weeks, Angela quietly followed every piece of legal advice she was given. She opened a separate bank account, updated important financial records, secured copies of every shared document, and began searching for a new place to live. She didn't tell her family or mutual friends what she was planning because she didn't want rumors or emotional confrontations to interfere with the process. She continued going to work every day, smiling politely whenever Marcus was home and carrying herself with the same quiet dignity that had always defined her. Marcus noticed the change, but he misunderstood it completely. He assumed Angela had accepted the distance between them and decided to stop asking questions. The silence gave him confidence. He believed she had finally learned to live with the choices he was making. Every day that passed made him feel even more certain that he was in complete control. Marcus became increasingly consumed by his new life. Promotions, client meetings, networking events, and expensive dinners occupied almost every evening. He rarely noticed that Angela was slowly removing pieces of her life from the house. Important photographs disappeared from the walls. Personal documents were packed away. Clothes she no longer needed were donated. Small boxes quietly left the house one at a time while Marcus remained too distracted to notice. The home that Angela had filled with warmth and stability for years was gradually becoming a place she no longer recognized. She wasn't just preparing to leave a house. She was letting go of the life she had spent years trying to build with the man she once believed would always stand beside her. Then the morning finally arrived. Marcus left for work believing it would be another ordinary day. Before walking out the door, he barely looked up from his phone as Angela wished him a good morning. He answered with a distracted nod and hurried away without realizing it would be the last time they would stand together inside that home as husband and wife. Angela waited until his car disappeared from the driveway before beginning the final chapter of her plan. With the help of a moving company and a close friend, she packed the remaining belongings that belonged to her. Every box represented years of memories, sacrifice, and hope. By late afternoon, the apartment that had once echoed with laughter and shared dreams stood almost empty. Angela carefully placed a neatly organized envelope on the kitchen counter, picked up her last suitcase, locked the front door behind her, and quietly walked away without looking back. Marcus returned home later that evening expecting another quiet night. As he unlocked the front door, something immediately felt different. The familiar sound of Angela humming while preparing dinner was gone. The living room felt strangely empty. The photographs that had once filled the shelves had vanished. The decorations Angela loved were no longer there. He walked from room to room calling her name, but only silence answered him. His heartbeat quickened as he entered the bedroom and found half the closet completely empty. The realization hit him all at once. Angela hadn't gone out for the evening. She had left. Confused and increasingly anxious, Marcus returned to the kitchen where the envelope sitting neatly on the counter finally caught his attention. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were divorce papers, accompanied by a brief handwritten letter. Angela thanked him for the years they had shared, acknowledged the dreams they had once built together, and reminded him that love could survive hardship but could not survive disrespect. She wrote that she had kept every promise she ever made to him, even after he stopped keeping his. She wished him success in the life he had chosen, but she would no longer sacrifice her peace for someone who no longer valued her. Marcus slowly lowered the letter and looked around the empty house. For the first time since receiving his dream job, the silence felt overwhelming. Every room reminded him of the woman who had carried him through unemployment, encouraged him when rejection nearly broke his spirit, worked endless hours so he could build a better future, and believed in him when no one else did. He remembered the nights Angela came home exhausted yet still found the strength to encourage him. He remembered the certifications she had paid for, the meals she skipped so he could eat, and the promise he had made across their kitchen table that success would never change the way he loved her. Now, standing alone in the house they had once called home, Marcus finally understood something he had ignored for far too long. Everything he had achieved rested on sacrifices that Angela had willingly made, and by the time he recognized her worth, the one person who had believed in him from the very beginning had already chosen to walk away. Weeks turned into months, and for the first time in years, Angela began living for herself instead of carrying someone else's future on her shoulders. The small apartment she moved into wasn't nearly as large as the house she had left behind, but every corner of it brought her something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. She decorated it exactly the way she wanted, surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared about her, and slowly began rebuilding the dreams she had placed on hold for so many years. The extra shifts she once worked to support Marcus became investments in her own future. She enrolled in classes she had postponed, started saving for herself instead of someone else, and rediscovered the confident woman she had nearly forgotten. The pain of Marcus's betrayal didn't disappear overnight, but with every passing day, it lost its power over her. Angela eventually realized that moving on wasn't about proving Marcus wrong. It was about proving to herself that her happiness was never meant to depend on someone else's choices. Marcus, however, found that success wasn't nearly as satisfying as he had imagined. The promotions continued, his salary increased, and his professional reputation grew stronger, yet the excitement faded every time he returned to an empty home. The expensive furniture, designer clothes, and luxury lifestyle he had worked so hard to achieve suddenly felt meaningless without someone to share them with. His coworkers admired his accomplishments, but none of them knew the woman who had quietly made those accomplishments possible. There were moments when Marcus would drive past places that reminded him of Angela: the neighborhood cafe where they shared coffee during difficult times, the grocery store where they laughed while stretching every dollar, and the small park where they once dreamed about the future they hoped to build together. Those memories no longer brought comfort. They reminded him of opportunities he would never have again. One afternoon, nearly a year after Angela left, Marcus unexpectedly saw her while attending a community fundraising event. She looked different not because of expensive clothes or a new hairstyle, but because the heaviness she had carried for so long was gone. She smiled freely, laughed with genuine happiness, and carried herself with a confidence that came from healing rather than bitterness. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Marcus walked toward her, hoping for one more conversation, one more chance to explain, one more opportunity to apologize for everything he had done. Angela greeted him politely, listened quietly as he admitted his mistakes, and accepted his apology with grace. But when Marcus hinted that he wished they could start over, Angela gently shook her head. She told him she had already forgiven him because forgiveness had set her free. What she couldn't do was return to a chapter of her life that had already ended. Some lessons, she explained, only arrive after we've lost what mattered most. She wished him well, smiled one last time, and walked away without anger, without resentment, and without looking back. Marcus remained standing there long after Angela disappeared into the crowd. For the first time, he fully understood that losing Angela hadn't happened on the day she left the house with her suitcases. He had begun losing her the moment he stopped appreciating the sacrifices she made, the moment he allowed success to replace gratitude, and the moment he believed the person who stood beside him during his struggles would always be there no matter how he treated her. He had spent years chasing a better life, only to discover that he had abandoned the very person who had helped him reach it. Money had opened new doors, but it couldn't reopen the one he had closed with his own choices. Stories like Marcus and Angela's remind us that success is never measured only by promotions, salaries, or material possessions. Real success is found in how we treat the people who believe in us before the world recognizes our value. The people who stand beside us during our lowest moments deserve to be remembered during our highest ones. Loyalty should never be rewarded with neglect, and love should never be taken for granted simply because it has always been there. Sometimes the greatest loss in life isn't financial. It's realizing too late that the person who loved you unconditionally has found the strength to love themselves enough to walk away. Now we'd like to hear from you. If you were Angela, would you forgive Marcus or move on forever? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could encourage someone facing a similar situation today. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Mojora Tales, and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Until next time, remember to value the people who stand with you when you have nothing, because they are often the ones who matter most when you finally have everything.